Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Amanda Zhivkov with Beryl Consulting Company. Today we have Will. He is from McKinsey. We're going to ask him a few questions today. He's also one of our speakers today. Our first question for you, Will, is when you think about how portfolio companies should approach generative AI, what should they realistically expect today? And what's the next breakthrough that will truly drive adoption and operational improvement?
That's really a good question. So right now, what you're seeing is companies have not fully operationalized generative AI. If you take a look, there's a bunch of leaders in the market that are going down a path of fully scaling AI, fully growing it, and even kind of outsourcing to generative AI full processes. But what you're also finding is that there's a bit of a chasm, right? The majority of the market is still one kind of at a trial phase, where they're kind of using just a simple chat. There might be some front leaders inside of the organization that are actually able to identify and like use an agent, use GPTs themselves. Not a lot of people have actually gotten to the multi-agentic agent flow, right? So when we see this, we think it's about 80 to 90% of the population is still using just Chat GPT and like just those basic prompts. What has really kind of given people conviction to really kind of move forward is that Chat GPT 5 has really kind of driven a substantial edge to the actual technology. And now you're actually able to find attribution. There's contextual engineering, real-time compute that is allowing people to actually intercede and actually put in place the proper governance. So that way companies can feel comfortable about the output, that it's not giving you a biased answer, that it's giving you an answer that's in line with the company's convictions, and that you can actually kind of trust moving forward. Now, once again, we're still not at a point where Gen AI can be fully on its own. What you're seeing nowadays is that almost all of the operating models that we're putting into place really do still have an operator in the loop when it's something that is critical, right? You can take a look at some of the famous stories where people have just relied upon Chat GPT or generative AI, and you see that people are getting themselves into trouble. They're putting out reports that might not necessarily be fully accurate, right? That's one of the key pieces. It still requires that person in the loop. It still requires that experienced judgment to make sure that the generative AI technology is not leading you down a primrose path, and that it's not necessarily giving you a bad hallucination as you're working through the technology.
And thank you for that. I'm just going to tee up with another question just to kind of go off of that as well. In your view, what is the single biggest lever a P portfolio company should pull to drive value in a turnaround scenario today?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we really kind of think about the turnaround scenarios, there's a few kind of key axioms and principles. One is cash is king, right? So whenever you're thinking about that, you want to take a look at how you can actually maximize the cash that's available to the company. That is through the working capital lens. It's also through quick hit cash initiatives that allow you to extend the overall runway before there's any sort of issues, right? So that's going to be the key element that you always want to focus in on. The final bit that you also want to start thinking through and driving to completion is the actual turnaround, right? The actual, how do I increase the actual revenue? That is one that has always been a bit of a struggle, right? You don't necessarily know what's the actual deterioration in the asset. You need to make sure that you have a full understanding of what has actually gone wrong, to make sure that you're not just catching a falling knife. The thing that you typically are looking for is where you have a solid core, true affinity, true sponsorship of the actual asset itself. And then you leverage that strength, and then you actually are able to kind of pivot and grow the revenue off of that base, whatever that solid intangible core is inside of that asset. I've seen it one where, listen, there's a bunch of the business divisions where we had to kind of say, listen, those are no longer going to go forward. And then we had to kind of pick one or two of the legs of the stool that we were then able to grow. In one situation that I worked on, it was a single business line. Actually, there was technically two business lines in that one, but when we actually took a look at how you actually go and improve the asset, what we found was it wasn't necessarily anything wrong with the underlying business. It was actually the sales model. And so we were actually able to look upstream, identify that marketing had basically had a bad market segmentation. We then worked with the market. We had then worked with the marketing team to improve their actual their go-to-market and their actual targeting, improving customer segmentation. That then allowed you to have a very crystallized sales proposition, and that actually allowed us to improve the overall sales effectiveness and actually grow top line for that asset. We were also aided by a little bit of macro tailwind, but they were able to escape any sort of distress situation when we stepped in and were able to kind of drive that value.
Interesting, and thank you for that. I'm just gonna do one final question. My last question is, and a lot of people are asking this question as well, is what are the biggest shifts you're seeing in private equity value creation? And where's that next source of alpha really coming from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the macro environment today is really driving a lot of people to extend their hold periods. So the real critical shift that has occurred over the past 3 to 4 years has been really kind of focusing in on the actual operations of the assets. When we take a look at the empirical data around that, in support of it, all the private equity operating groups that we've seen have actually doubled the size of their actual personnel. Just because there's so much demand now from the deal teams that need to extend those deal horizons and actually still create value inside of the asset. So one, operational improvement has become the linchpin of that. Now, what is operational improvement? It's both top line and bottom line growth. We've actually seen a lot of success actually putting in place very simple agentic solutions in order to grow top line anywhere between 10 to 20% in some categories and some verticals. We've also seen a significant amount of opportunity just in standard playbooks around value creation and operational excellence, right? Everything from just making sure that your supply chain is operating efficiently, your S&OP process is well tuned and honed for the current environment. There was one situation I stepped into where I saw a 10% delta between what they continued to buy versus the actual demand. And so that was generating a significant amount of drag on their actual cash and capital, right? And so the ROIC was actually going down. And so we actually just kind of said, listen, you need to fix this. And then we helped them support that and fix it, right? There's another situation where they weren't necessarily fully deploying their sales force and their sales model and their go-to-market for one of their service lines. We stepped in and kind of said, listen, we can help you here. Here's the different formulas in which we can actually support. One, there is a bit of a marketing discussion that we need to have. We need to improve your overall effectiveness of the marketing. The second part is we actually needed to retarget the sales and they actually get the right value proposition to the right customers. And then there was a bit of a channel issue that we had to kind of work through as well in order to kind of get them to their full potential. But when you do that, you can unlock tremendous amounts of value. In that situation, we were able to grow revenue by 20% year over year.
And then just to kind of put it all together, what are three bullet points you want everyone listening today to take away as far as your presentation, your partner at McKinsey? What are your three takeaways?
Yeah, and I'll segment it between just general value creation and then also um, generative AI. So let's start with generative AI. One, 2025 is 1990. Just thinking about the paradigm, 2025 for generative AI is basically 1990 for the personal computer. We're at about the same amount of penetration, 80 to 90% of the population is now using it. What we're going to find in business is that those that are able to actually harness the power that is generated by the large language models, the generative AI technology, right, and actually able to drive business value from it, they're going to differentiate themselves over the next 5 to 10 years. The thing that we are seeing now on that, right, and what really drives distinctive value for businesses is one, the operating model that you deploy, and it has to be something that fully evolves. You can't be stuck in your old processes. That requires a significant amount of change management, right? And that's one of the key things that we're seeing, that people are not investing enough into the change management to truly drive the value of generative AI. The second, and what really drives distinctive performance on the generative AI, right? If you think about it, almost everyone can have access to a large language model. It costs $20 per month. But at the same time, what will differentiate your organization is the proprietary data that you can bring to the table, right? Things that allow you to do retrieval augmented generative AI, RAG models, right? Like that's going to be a substantial benefit. The more data that you can provide to it that gives it unique insight, the more value that you as an organization can drive off of that technology. When you think about McKinsey, we have 40 years of transformative efforts across the entire ecosystem of companies in the US or well, globally. And when you think about that competitive advantage in this market where proprietary data is becoming the coin of the realm, we're at a distinct advantage over others. And we're continuing to gain that year over year.
Thank you so much, Will, for that. We appreciate it. I'm Amanda. I'm with Beryl Consulting Group. Please take a listen to Will's speaking today on our panel. We look forward to hearing more insights from Will. Please follow us at Beryl Elites at our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone.